The sun burned hot over the small town of Clearbrook, Montana, baking its red brick storefronts and shimmering pavement. Officer Ethan Miller, tall and broad-shouldered at 38, walked slowly along Main Street with his 9-year-old daughter, Sophie. For once his gun was at home, replaced by a coffee cup in hand and the rare comfort of time off. Sophie skipped beside him, her ponytail bouncing with every step, her sundress catching the golden light. Laughter from a nearby park mixed with the hum of traffic, but their calm afternoon ended abruptly. Sophie's steps faltered, her wide gray eyes fixed on a corner ahead. There sat a ragged man with a torn plaid shirt holding a crude cardboard sign that read, $5 for the beast. And beside him lay an old German shepherd, ribs sharp, scars deep, one ear bent, his body trembling like it no longer belonged to him. Sophie froze, her hand tightening around her father's. Ethan followed her gaze, his chest tightening at the sight. The ragged man, Harold Boone, shifted impatiently, smirking beneath his unkempt beard. $5, he muttered, to no one in particular, eyes darting. The shepherd's fur was dulled with grime, patches missing around his legs and muzzle. When it tried to move, its hind leg buckled, showing an old fracture. Its eyes, deep, dark brown, seemed hollow, yet carried an ember of life. Sophie whispered almost breathlessly, "Daddy, look at him." Ethan had seen neglected animals before in his career, but something about this dog struck deeper, as if it wasn't just pain he carried, but history. He shook his head gently, torn between caution and pity. Sophie, however, crouched down, sundress brushing the sidewalk, staring straight into those eyes. The world around them disappeared. The old shepherd lifted its head slightly, meeting Sophie's gaze. For a moment, the sounds of traffic and footsteps seemed to fade. It wasn't just a glance, it was a plea. Sophie's voice broke as she whispered, "He needs us." Ethan's jaw tightened. He didn't need another burden. Vet bills, complications, danger, all circled in his mind. Harold smirked, spitting on the curb. Take him or don't, he ain't worth more than that anyway. The casual cruelty made Ethan's stomach turn. Sophie turned, her gray eyes shimmering with tears. "Daddy, please, we can't just walk away." Ethan looked at the battered sign, then at the child clutching his hand, then at the dog who had once clearly been proud, strong. With a sigh, he pulled a $5 bill from his wallet. The man snatched it and walked off quickly, disappearing without a word. As Harold vanished into the crowd, his speed unsettled Ethan. It was almost as if he had been desperate to rid himself of the dog. Ethan's instincts prickled, but Sophie didn't notice. She was already kneeling, whispering to the shepherd softly. The dog shifted, its ribs heaving, but it didn't resist her touch. Then, as if summoning strength it barely had, its tail gave a faint, fragile wag. Ethan crouched down beside them, his steady hand resting on the shepherd's head. The coarse fur prickled his palm, but beneath it he felt life, fragile but present. "He's ours now," Sophie whispered. Ethan studied the scars across its neck and legs. A groove circled its throat, like it had worn something far too tight, far too long. Not random wounds, something darker. Still, as Sophie hugged the dog gently, Ethan realized they had crossed a line.
At home that evening, Sophie was already at work with a blue bucket, soap foaming as she scrubbed the shepherd carefully. Ethan leaned against the porch railing, watching quietly. Each layer of grime peeled back more of the truth. Sophie gasped when she uncovered a deep, hairless groove around the dog's neck, puckered skin like a phantom collar. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice trembling. Ethan crouched, running his hand over the scar. His jaw tightened. This wasn't from accident. It was restraint. Chains. He spotted more. Thin scars across the ribs, patches of missing fur, and a limp that spoke of a healed fracture. Sophie stroked his muzzle gently, her eyes wet. Who would hurt a dog like this? Ethan didn't answer. Instead, he whispered almost to himself, "Some people should never be near animals." Sophie hugged him tighter. "He's not broken, Daddy. He's a survivor." Later, as dusk settled over Clearbrook, Sophie pressed her case again. "Please let him sleep in my room tonight," she begged, clutching her stuffed bunny. Ethan hesitated at her bedroom door, the shepherd lying silently in the hall. He looked at Rex, the name Sophie had already given him, and saw nothing threatening, just a battered soul, watching, waiting. "All right," Ethan finally agreed. Sophie's eyes lit up as she spread a blanket on the floor. Rex limped inside, circled once, and collapsed with a sigh at the foot of her bed. Sophie reached down, brushing his scarred fur with small fingers. "Good night, Rex," she whispered. The old shepherd's ear twitched, and for the first time since they met, his tail thumped faintly against the floor. Ethan stood at the doorway, feeling something stir inside him, the strange calm of trust.
It was past midnight when Ethan stirred awake. A sound cut through the stillness, claws scratching across hardwood. He sat up, pulse quickening. Down the hallway, a low, guttural growl vibrated through the house. Ethan grabbed a flashlight and moved carefully. Sophie's door was closed, her soft breathing audible. The growl came from the kitchen. There, Rex paced near the back door, his body rigid, eyes locked outside. His tail was stiff, ears sharp, the bent one twitching. When Ethan approached, the shepherd growled again, a sound deep and urgent. Then, without hesitation, Rex lunged forward, pawing at the door with surprising strength. Ethan opened it cautiously. Rain mist clung to the night, carrying a faint metallic smell. Rex darted into the darkness, his limp forgotten. Ethan followed with his flashlight, unease crawling his skin. The shepherd wasn't just restless, he was leading. Ethan's beam sliced through mist and weeds as he trailed Rex, his boots crunching gravel. The shepherd moved quickly, weaving through brush with purpose, stopping only to glance back as if to ensure Ethan followed. They crossed the abandoned railroad tracks, the air heavy with silence. Finally, Rex stopped at a rusted chain-link fence, leaning under the weight of time. Beyond it loomed a warehouse, windows shattered, doors hanging crooked. Rex nosed through a gap, waiting. Ethan's instinct screamed, but he slipped inside. The air was thick with rot, stale urine and rust. His flashlight swept across the floor until it hit metal. Rows of cages, stacked like coffins, their doors open like broken mouths. Scratch marks etched deep into the floor. Some cages still held old collars, others a shredded blanket stiff with blood. Ethan's throat tightened. This wasn't random. This was organized cruelty.
Rex's growl deepened, vibrating in his chest as he padded toward a stack of crates. Ethan followed, lifting the beam higher. Against one wall, he found a rusted filing cabinet. With effort, he pried it open. Inside lay logbooks, brittle with age, listing breeds, weights, and dollar figures. His stomach churned. This wasn't a kennel. It was inventory. His eyes froze on the last page. X14, hold for pickup. The handwriting was recent. Someone was still active. Ethan's heart pounded with rage. He remembered complaints years ago, whispers of missing dogs, strange vans at night. He hadn't had evidence then. Now it was here in his hands. He pulled out his phone, snapping photos, every page, every mark. Behind him, Rex's growl shifted to a bark, sharp and insistent, pulling Ethan toward the far end. Something else was waiting in the shadows. Ethan followed Rex deeper, his light falling on a massive rolling cage, half hidden beneath a tarp. The smell hit him first, foul, metallic, old blood baked into the rust. He pulled the cover away. The cage was large enough for 4 dogs at once. Its floor bore deep grooves from claws that had once fought to escape. Ethan stepped back, bile rising. Rex barked sharply again, pawing at the cage, then looking at Ethan with eyes burning in the dark. "You've been here before," Ethan whispered, realization chilling his spine. Rex whined, low and mournful, his head lowering against the cold steel. Ethan clenched his fists, fury boiling. This wasn't just neglect, it was betrayal. Rex hadn't wandered into their lives by chance. He had carried them straight back to his nightmare. And now Ethan understood. This wasn't finished. It was only beginning.
The next morning, the world outside looked ordinary, but Ethan's thoughts were far from calm. He couldn't erase the cages, the logbooks, the smell of rust and blood. At breakfast, Sophie happily poured milk over her cereal, oblivious. Rex lay at her feet, watchful, silent. Ethan tried to focus, but his eyes kept drifting to the scar circling Rex's neck. This wasn't coincidence. The dog hadn't stumbled into their lives. He had led them here for a reason. That night, long after Sophie fell asleep, Ethan sat at the kitchen table, files and photos spread out before him. Rex patted in quietly, something clutched in his jaws. He dropped it at Ethan's feet, a rusted key ring coated in dirt. Ethan picked it up, heart pounding. Stamped into the tag were the words, Unit B, Forest Lockers 712X. Rex sat, unblinking. He was guiding Ethan again. The following evening, Ethan prepared for a quiet patrol near the east edge of town. He loaded his cruiser with gear, intending to scout the area behind the quarry. Sophie watched from the window, her face set with a determination he didn't notice. When his car disappeared down the street, she slipped outside with her bike. The dusk air was heavy, the smell of rain clinging to the wind. Ethan parked near the third bridge, flashlight in hand, listening to the distant whine of insects. At first, there was nothing. Then, faintly, came a whimper beneath the bridge. He froze. Sophie, hidden in the shadows, had heard it too. Crawling carefully down the embankment, she found a shivering puppy wedged beneath broken crates. Its ribs showed, one eye swollen shut, its tail tucked tightly. Sophie wrapped it in her hoodie, trembling. "You're safe now," she whispered.
Ethan's beam caught a flash of green in the trees. Sophie! His voice cut through the dark like a whip. She froze, clutching the small bundle in her arms. Ethan ran, heart hammering. What are you doing here? But before anger could rise, he saw the puppy, frail, battered, barely alive. The child's compassion disarmed his fury. He was alone, Sophie said, her chin trembling, just like Rex was. Ethan stared at the pup. His fur was matted, a white patch on his chest, ears floppy and torn. He couldn't abandon him. They drove home in silence, Sophie cradling the puppy against her lap. At the house, she named him Buddy. Bruno sniffed cautiously, then gently nudged the pup's ear before settling beside him. Ethan leaned against the wall, realization pressing in. This wasn't coincidence. Rex and Sophie were uncovering something much darker. Rain swept in that night, rattling windows, filling gutters with rushing streams. Ethan sat at the table, Buddy wrapped in a towel on Sophie's lap, Rex curled nearby like a sentinel. Papers littered the table, cage photos, logbooks, the key ring with Forest Lockers 712X. Ethan traced the numbers with his finger, his mind racing. Sophie looked up, her voice small. "Daddy? Why would anyone hurt them?" Ethan's throat tightened. He had no answer that wouldn't break her heart. Rex stirred suddenly, padding over to the window. His ears perked, body stiff. A low growl escaped him. Ethan followed his gaze. The street outside shimmered under the storm, but through the rain, headlights slowed near the curb. A dark van idled too long before pulling away. Ethan's chest tightened. Whoever had owned Rex, whoever had run those cages, wasn't gone. They were watching.
The next day, an anonymous tip arrived. A note slipped under Ethan's cruiser windshield. Check the property behind Miller's Quarry, South Path. You'll hear them before you see them. His pulse quickened as he drove out toward the forest, Rex in the back seat, silent and ready. Parking under a canopy of pines, Ethan stepped into the drizzle. The air smelled of pine and mud. Rex leapt down immediately, nose to the ground, tail stiff, leading with confidence. Through tangled brush and slick paths, they came upon it, a hidden compound. Tarps flapped in the wind, pallets stacked like walls, barbed wire strung crudely. Inside, faint cries carried on the air. Whimpers, yelps, the clink of chains. Ethan's breath caught. Rex growled low, body trembling with recognition. Then footsteps cracked behind him. Ethan turned. From the tree line, 3 figures emerged, faces hard, eyes cold. The leader stepped forward first, Vince Jargo. Mid-40s, thick build, tattooed forearms, dark goatee. He wore a sleeveless shirt despite the chill, his eyes small and calculating. Behind him stood Luther and Clem Leaner, brothers, their faces weathered, hands calloused, Clem gripping a wrench. Vince smirked, his voice slow. Didn't expect company. Ethan's stomach nodded. He recognized the type, men who thrived in shadows. "This your operation?" Ethan asked. Vince tilted his head. "We're just minding our business. You should mind yours." Luther spat on the ground. "You ain't got a warrant, Miller. No badge will save you here." Ethan's hand hovered near his sidearm, his heart pounding. Rex stepped forward, teeth bared, his growl rumbling through the clearing. Vince's smirk faded into something colder. "Walk away, officer. You got a daughter, right? Bad things happen to families who dig too deep."
The words hit Ethan like a blade. They knew Sophie. Rage surged in his chest, but before he could move, Rex lunged forward with a bark that thundered through the trees. The men flinched, stepping back instinctively. Ethan pulled Rex close, his heart hammering. He wasn't ready for a fight, outnumbered and unarmed with evidence alone. "I'll be back," Ethan said through clenched teeth, "with a warrant and an army." Vince smirked faintly, but his eyes narrowed, sensing the promise wasn't empty. Ethan backed away, pulling Rex with him, retreating down the slope until the compound faded into shadow. Every step away felt like betrayal, but he knew he had no choice. Not yet. Behind him, Rex snarled until the compound was out of sight, his body rigid. Ethan whispered to himself, "They made this personal, and they'll regret it." That night, silence in the house felt heavier than the storm outside. Sophie sat on the couch, arms wrapped around Buddy. Bruno rested at her feet, scars catching the lamplight. When Ethan entered, his uniform damp, Sophie looked up nervously. "You found them, didn't you?" she whispered. Ethan hesitated, then nodded. "Men who run it. Bad men." Sophie's lip trembled. "They know about me, don't they?" Her voice cracked. Ethan's heart broke. He knelt beside her, taking her small hands. "They'll never touch you, I promise." She threw her arms around him, burying her face into his chest. Rex stepped forward silently, pressing his scarred muzzle against her shoulder like a shield. For the first time, Ethan let tears burn his eyes. This wasn't just a case, it was war. And the stakes weren't only for animals, they were for his family.
Morning came gray and restless. Ethan sat at the table with the case files, but his mind kept replaying Vince's words. He couldn't let fear control him. Rex padded into the kitchen, something clinking in his mouth. He dropped it onto Ethan's lap, a rusted locker key, the tag etched with Forest Storage, Unit B. Ethan's hand shook. Another lead. Rex whined softly, nudging his leg. "You're not done showing me things, are you?" Ethan murmured. He clenched his jaw. This wasn't just about cages anymore. It was about dismantling everything these men built. He grabbed his badge, holstered his weapon, and kissed Sophie's forehead as she slept. But Sophie, half awake, saw the determination in his face and felt her stomach twist. She whispered to Buddy, curled beside her, "We're not letting him face this alone," and she meant it. That evening, Ethan met 2 trusted deputies in the woods near the quarry. Carla Boone, sharp-eyed and calm, and Jordan Ree, quiet but unshakably loyal. Rain slicked their jackets, the forest shrouded in fog. Ethan briefed them quickly. Dogs in cages, 3 men armed, dangerous. Carla nodded, bolt cutters in hand. Jordan checked his flashlight, covered with red film to preserve vision. Ethan crouched beside Rex. Find the way. The old shepherd leapt forward, ears sharp, tail rigid, leading them through tangled brush. Sophie, hidden in the back seat of the cruiser against her father's orders, whispered to herself, "Please come back safe." In the compound, shadows moved, lantern light flickering under tarps, faint cries of dogs carried on the rain. Ethan raised his fist, signaling the split. Carla flanked right, Jordan left. Ethan and Rex pressed forward into the heart of danger.
The compound's silence shattered as the first cage creaked open. Two terrified spaniels whimpered, tails between their legs, their eyes wide with confusion. Jordan crouched, whispering softly as he guided them out. Ethan's pulse raced, every sense on edge. Then, a sudden crash, a shed door burst open. Luther lunged with a crowbar, his face twisted in rage. Ethan barely had time to react. Rex launched forward, colliding with Luther's leg, jaws locking on denim and flesh. Luther howled, stumbling, the weapon clattering to the mud. Ethan raised his weapon, but froze. Rex had already forced the man down. Mud splattered, Luther pinned, his cries muffled under growls. In the chaos, Sophie slipped from the cruiser unnoticed. She ducked under the fence, heart pounding, eyes locked on cages. She wasn't thinking about rules anymore. She only thought of saving them. Sophie ran through the rain-slipped compound, mud splashing against her legs. Her flashlight beam shook as she found a cage in the back. Inside, an old yellow Labrador lay motionless, ribs showing, blood soaking her side. Sophie's heart broke. She dropped to her knees, prying the latch with trembling hands. "It's okay," she whispered, voice shaking. "I've got you." The dog whimpered, too weak to resist, pressing into Sophie's hoodie as she wrapped her arms around it. Across the yard, Ethan turned, panic seizing him when he saw her silhouette. "Sophie!" he shouted. But before he could reach her, Clem lunged from the shadows, knife in hand. Sophie froze, clutching the bleeding dog tighter. The blade gleamed in the lantern light. Clem's grin was cruel. He sprinted toward them, the knife raised high. Ethan's scream caught in his throat, but Rex was already moving.
Rex slammed into Clem mid-stride, knocking the knife from his hand. The blade clattered across the mud as Clem fell hard, Rex's teeth sinking deep into his arm. Clem screamed, thrashing, but the German shepherd held fast, his growl a storm that wouldn't relent. Sophie scrambled back, shielding the Labrador, tears streaming. Ethan sprinted in, kicking the knife away before snapping cuffs over Clem's wrists. Carla rushed in from the right, taser in hand. Her bolt shot into Vince Jargo's chest just as he charged with a pipe. Sparks cracked, Vince convulsed, collapsing face first in the mud. Within moments, chaos erupted, officers shouting, dogs barking, rain hammering the ground. But at the center, Sophie clutched the Labrador, Rex guarding them both, his scarred frame a living wall. For Ethan, the world narrowed to one truth. His daughter was alive because of Rex. By dawn, the compound was silent. Dozens of dogs had been freed, their cries replaced by the sound of soft whimpers and tired breathing. Vince, Clem, and Luther sat cuffed in the mud, their heads bowed in defeat. Deputies loaded evidence, ledgers, collars, and crates marked with coded numbers. Ethan leaned against the cruiser, exhaustion heavy, his uniform torn and soaked. Sophie sat beside him, cradling the injured Labrador wrapped in a blanket. Buddy curled close, whimpering softly as though offering comfort. Rex lay nearby, chest heaving, blood flecked across his muzzle, but his eyes never left Sophie. She reached over, resting her small hand on his scarred head. "You saved me again," she whispered. Ethan closed his eyes, letting the words sink deep. Rex had been called a beast for $5, but tonight, he was nothing less than a savior.
At the precinct, paperwork filled the morning, but Ethan's thoughts lingered on the compound. Vince Jargo smirked through his booking, his silence more menacing than words.
Ethan knew men like him rarely worked alone. He glanced down at Rex, who lay at his feet, battle-worn but unbroken. The dog had once been abandoned, scarred, and discarded. Yet here he was, the key to exposing something far darker. Reporters crowded the steps outside, desperate for a statement. Ethan ignored them, focusing instead on Sophie, who sat in a chair, stroking the Labrador's ears. She had named her Hope. When asked why, Sophie answered simply, because she made it. The word hung in the air, powerful and undeniable. For Ethan, it wasn't just about the raid. It was about what Rex had given them, proof that broken things could still save the world. That evening, the Miller house felt different. Warmth filled the living room as Sophie, Buddy, and Hope lay nestled together on a thick rug. Rex sat nearby, his chest wrapped in light bandages, his gaze steady, protective. Ethan watched from the doorway, his heart heavy with gratitude. He crouched down, pulling something from his pocket, an old canine badge, a silver tag engraved with the word Valor. He fastened it gently onto Rex's collar. "You earned this a long time ago," he whispered. Rex blinked slowly, leaning into Ethan's chest with quiet trust. Sophie looked up from the floor, her gray eyes shining. "He's not just ours, Daddy," she said softly. "He's everyone's hero now." Ethan nodded, tears blurring his vision. The storm of their lives had brought them here, but with Rex by their side, they had hope again.
Word of the raid spread quickly. Clearbrook's small-town streets buzzed with whispers of the compound takedown and the unlikely hero at its center. Reporters arrived, cameras flashing, eager to capture Rex's scarred face and Sophie's unwavering smile. A local news station ran the headline, "Abandoned Canine Uncovers Town's Darkest Secret." Strangers left flowers and dog biscuits on Ethan's porch, notes scrawled with "Thank you" and "You saved them all." Sophie read each one aloud, her pride glowing brighter than the sun. Hope's wounds healed slowly, but every step she took in the backyard felt like victory. Buddy, playful as ever, trailed behind Sophie with boundless energy. And Rex? He chose the porch as his throne, lying in the shade where he could see them all, his ears twitching at every sound. He wasn't just guarding a house anymore, he was guarding a family reborn. Weeks later, Ethan transformed their backyard into something new: kennels, shaded play areas, and soft grassy patches for rescues to run. Sophie painted a wooden sign in bright blue and white letters, "Home for Paws." Volunteers soon arrived with donations and blankets, filling the yard with life. That first adoption day, children ran laughing through the grass, puppies tumbling at their feet. Hope was adopted by a kind young woman who wept when the Labrador licked her cheek. Buddy, though, never strayed from Sophie's side. His forever home had already been found. Rex watched from the porch, his eyes soft, tail thumping once in quiet approval. For Ethan, watching his daughter surrounded by life and laughter, he realized the cruel compound hadn't broken them. It had given them purpose, and that purpose was love, multiplied and shared.
One quiet evening, Sophie sat on the porch steps with her sketchbook. The sky burned orange as the sun dipped low, painting the yard in gold. She finished her drawing and held it up for Ethan. It showed the house, the kennels, children laughing, dogs running free. In the center stood a tall figure in uniform, a little girl by his side, and at their feet, a large German shepherd with a silver tag gleaming on his collar. Ethan swallowed hard, his chest tightening. "What's this?" he asked. Sophie shrugged, smiling. "Us and Rex." Ethan kissed the top of her head. "It's perfect." Rex patted over, leaning against Sophie's leg as she scratched behind his ear. His scarred silhouette glowed in the sunset, not broken, not discarded, but whole again, in the only way that mattered. That night, the moonlight washed across Clearbrook, silvering the rooftops and fields. Inside the Miller home, laughter carried softly through the walls, weaving into the night like music. On the porch, Rex lay stretched out, head on his paws, his body finally at ease. Buddy curled beside him while Hope slept soundly inside. The scarred shepherd lifted his head once, scanning the quiet street, ears twitching, eyes sharp. He no longer feared the shadows. He had faced them and won. Ethan stood at the window, watching, coffee in hand, his heart full. He whispered to himself, "We didn't just rescue him, he rescued us." Rex settled again, his breathing steady, his silver tag catching the glow of the moon. A discarded beast no more. He was a savior, a guardian, and the heart of a family that had finally found peace.